Hi, I'm Simon Hill and you're watching Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV.
Hi, I'm Daniel Mullen, former Adelaide United player and Asian Champions League winner with Western Sydney Wanderers. When it comes to any of my soccer needs, I do my shopping here at Soccer Locker. An Australian-owned and operated business, the store is located at Shop 5 of 181 to 183 Grange Road, Findon. Founded in 2017, Soccer Locker was introduced into the market to fulfil all the soccer-related needs of Australians, providing a huge range of quality clothing and equipment ranging from soccer balls, team kits, goalkeeper gear, accessories and much more. Recently arrived stock also includes stunning retro kits from some of our favourite past eras as fans of the world game. Soccer Locker is a specialist in premier range boots, Adidas and Puma, goalkeeper gear and licensed merchandise. Visit us online at www.soccerlocker.com.au with free delivery Australia-wide. So get shopping now at our Findon store, open from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. from Monday to Friday and open Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Not too often. Costa is that's a corner. Matt German has conceded a penalty. The youngster Anthony Costa. Now he angles it somewhat. Barker-Daish. That's a 2-1 for Adelaide United.
G'day guys and welcome to the Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV. I'm your host Ellis Gelios, coming to you today with a preview of our game against the Western Sydney Wanderers tonight at Cooper Stadium, and I'm joined by a man who played for the club between 2012 and 2014, played 23 games across the A-League and the Asian Champions League, now playing for the Moreland Zebras with two other ex-Adelaide United alumni, Cameron Watson and Dario Vidosic. I speak of Jake Barker-Daish. Jake, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show. Tell us what you've been up to.
Mate, no, thanks for the introduction and congrats to you on creating a pretty cool segment here that's been seems like it's getting some legs and some viewership, so well done. Not too much. I'm just keeping busy with work. I do a couple of things, as you know, we spoke before. We jumped on around my podcast that I'm doing, and I work now for a tech company, which is really interesting, and obviously now back trying to play football again. So that's kind of been keeping me busy. So expecting a cold Melbourne winter.
Oh, we can see with the beanie there, mate. Jake Barker-Daish, the founder of the new podcast. It's a great niche podcast in the Australian football market and the Australian sporting market for that matter. The Unlaced Podcast. We'll be talking a lot more about that at length. But before we do any of that, we're going to preview the big game tomorrow night against Western Sydney Wanderers. Jake, a club that actually you made your home debut against for Adelaide United back in round 2 of 2012-13. Going to ask you about that a little bit later on. But before we get into things, guys, kickoff tonight at Cooper Stadium to 6:40 kickoff. Make sure if you can't get down there that you're watching on Fox Sports or the Carrier Sports app. In squad news, Carl Viet has promoted Michael Moroney, Al Hassan Toure, and Yaya Dukali. Ryan Kiddo also returns from injury. Michael Jakobsen, however, is out with a hamstring injury. Now, Jake, the first question I want to ask you is how the conundrum for Adelaide at centre-back should be addressed. Who should come in to replace the experienced head of Michael Jakobsen? Should it be Michael Moroney, who's someone that you played with briefly at the club? Or should it be one of the younger guys in George Timothy or Yared Abichu? And just as a follow-on to that, is experience the most important thing when it comes to making a force change in the position of centre-back?
It's a good question. And I think it's obviously dependent on the environment and the coach. I think the philosophy of Adelaide is to play young players. So I think if a young player is to come into that position, it's no surprise. And I think the mantra of the season, the last few years at Adelaide, has been to play young players, whether the situation's too grand or too small, it doesn't really matter. I think just looking at the season of where Adelaide is and the tightness of points from the top to sort of that 5th, 6th position, as you mentioned, it might be worth having Michael Moroney in for some experience, just because points are vital right now. Anything gained is going to be really valuable to cementing a finals position. But nonetheless, if I'm the coach, I wouldn't be too fearful of playing young players. Usually when you put the good young players in the deep end, they'll still do well. And obviously Elsie, he seems like he's young, but he's been there for a long time. He's quite experienced. So anyone next to him should be able to take some leadership and guidance off to perform well.
Yeah, he's the same age as you, actually. Moving forward, though, and you'll recall Jordan, obviously, from your time at the club. I want to ask you about James Teresi, who's a former Adelaide United player, and an Adelaide boy as well. We know he most certainly didn't leave here on good terms, as it was right on the eve of the A-League season starting, and there's no question that fans will be looking forward to giving him plenty of stick prior to kick-off tomorrow night. Now, as a pro from your playing days, do you think this would be something that weighs on his mind at all? And would it be something that potentially affects his preparation going into the game? And have you been in dressing rooms in the past where players have encountered similar situations at all? It's quite prevalent in the game. So, yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think as a player in those situations, when you're coming to a club you've just left, whether it be on good or bad terms, or for, in James's sake, a hometown of his, it's probably going to be in the back of his mind. Knowing James personally, though, and the sort of arenas he's played in and the stature of his career, I don't think it's going to faze him as much as you would think. I think if anything, it might help him, that sort of treatment. And I think it'll probably be in Adelaide's interest just to let him be, because motivating him might be to their detriment. He's a high quality player that probably would have done a lot of damage in Adelaide, and for whatever reason that couldn't work this year. But yeah, look, any player playing against the old team, there's always that something, whether they deny it or say it, that, there's always something there that they want to prove and want to play well in, and there's that extra motivation. And I think collectively the Wanderers will be aware of that and will probably utilise that to their advantage. And I think Adelaide, I'm sure there's going to be no tackles and things like that held back, so it'll be competitive. It'll be exciting to watch to see what happens. But knowing James personally, I don't think that's going to bother him. And having played against him when he was at Victory, it never fazed him when he came back to Adelaide. He always played well. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
Very well said indeed. We'll move along. So I want to ask you about the Wanderers coach, Carl Robinson. He's absolutely come out and baked the VAR after their last result, which was a draw against the Mariners on Tuesday night just gone. It's also worth noting VAR has been hugely influential in both Adelaide and Western Sydney's campaigns this season. VAR was nothing more than a futuristic concept the last time you played professionally, Jake. So I want to ask you what you've made of it so far in the game of football, but also in the A-League more specifically.
Yeah, look, I think common sense prevails with the technology at times. In one of the moments, I remember it might have been the 2010 World Cup, and it was might have been a quarterfinal or something.
Yeah.
England, Frank Lampard, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, that should have been a goal. And with VAR, it's a goal, and the tournament completely changes for England. And you think that's where technology is going to come in. Where I see potentially why it's got a lot of flags is, and a lot of referees are responsible for the on-field decisions. Obviously, they're not going to always get it right. If they did, they wouldn't be human. And to sort of, be that human error, that's what the technology is there for. Where I've struggled to kind of see how it benefits the game is the stop-start nature of it. It kind of shifts and stops, and you're waiting, and it kind of takes away the feeling of what football's about, and it becomes a bit more robotic, which I don't like. And then secondary to that, the people that are making the decisions behind the screen are still getting it wrong. And that's where you think that would be the easy part. So whether it be a handball or an offside, VAR still seems to be falling apart on that front. And I've seen red cards and yellow cards given across world football for the tiniest things that the blind eye would miss on the field. And it's actually quite unlucky that VAR's there, that the player sees yellow or red because they see a clip of the boot before they got the ball. Like, those things wouldn't happen. So you've kind of got to be quite perfect with how you interact and operate now as a player, because you're going to get caught out otherwise. But yeah, I think there's frustration. There's positives and negatives with anything. I just think it's getting a bit too much power of the game. And I'd like to see, I guess, the stop-start nature of it kind of restrict. And also, I think the people behind the screens at times have just been getting it wrong. And you sit there, as a fan, you're like, I can see it sitting on my couch. How have you got that wrong? You're getting paid for this, which is quite frustrating. Like, I see it in the EPL all the time, and you're like, well, what are they doing? But I'm hoping it's going to get better with time. It takes time to get used to change. But at the same time, obviously, there's some errors that it's making more than what the blind eye would have done previously.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. Plenty to contend over with whether it should come under fire and scrutiny, with some drastic changes that should be made perhaps going forward. I've got to ask you how you rate both teams this season so far, because they're sort of sitting not too far apart on the table, but the Wanderers sort of very inconsistent, no clear identity about the way they're playing as yet under the coach, the new manager, Carl Robertson. Adelaide United, obviously, we know how good they can be when they get on a roll, but there's always that vulnerability when you're fielding so much youth in games and in big games in particular. So how do you rate where both teams are at the moment in the A-League, Jake?
Yeah, look, I think Western Sydney, I was never going to jump the gun on my sort of interpretation of what they were like because of the amount of change that they had so close to the season, like you mentioned with the coach, Carl Robinson, who was obviously quite well regarded at Newcastle coming in. And then particularly in the transfer window, Western Sydney, they brought in players like this. They brought in players a few months ago now, but just before the season and even through the season, they brought in quite key players to their squad. So I think with that, you've got to allow time. I think what's going to be really important for them is that they stay close to the finals pack and make sure that they find that gel and consistency at the right time of the season. I think they've got the quality in their squad to do that. The question is whether they can. But yeah, I haven't really got a firm view on them yet. I think what's important for them and what will be testing and time will tell is where they are at the end of the season. Whether if they're in the finals and they're starting to gel well, I think they'll be a very tough opposition to face, particularly at home. From an Adelaide point of view, obviously everyone knows I played with Bruce and I'm quite close with him. And since he's come in, I guess, as the director of football, and even probably prior to him, youth was always promoted at Adelaide. And I think a big part of that was the money that Adelaide had in comparison to maybe some other clubs wasn't as grand. So blooding youth was an important part of the club's philosophy. And I think playing young players has always been a good place to go to, which is actually one of the reasons why I signed there. But I've been really impressed with Adelaide. I think that's what made the league so exciting this year is the young players that we've seen come in, and the fact that when you play young players, when they get opportunities and they are good enough, they will show their quality and they will stand up. And I think Adelaide have started to show that. And what's been impressive is the amount of young players that they play consistently in key positions. Whether you win, lose or draw, that's going to be really powerful for Adelaide. And the fact that if they can hold on to those players for a couple more years, there's no reason why they can't contest for silverware. So I think it's just about riding the journey with some of the younger players, complementing them with some senior players, which they've done. Obviously, some of the imports they've got are really powerful players from a leadership standpoint and quality. So I'm a big fan of Adelaide. They're probably one of the teams that I like watching the most just because of the youth aspect. And I think they've got really quality young players.
Beautifully summed up. We'll move forward. I just want to ask you about your memories from playing against the Wanderers. You made your home debut for Adelaide United against them in 2012-13, and that was a win on that night as well. You came on with 15 or so minutes remaining. I think you replaced Osama Malik. But over the next two seasons that you played at Adelaide, are there any memories that sort of jump out against Wanderers, home or away?
Probably not anything specific. They were just a really hard opposition to face at that time. I think you'll probably remember, obviously, they had Tony Popovich as the coach. They had the likes of Aaron Moy, who was like one of their sort of Australian marquees at the time. They had Beauchamp and Topper Stanley at the back, who were like, twin towers. They were massive. And then the thing that was most notable for me about them was Shinji Ono. He was just like a superstar and a rock star, kind of maybe one tier under Del Piero of like stature in the league at the time. So every time we played him, he was always on our radar of like, we need to be careful about Ono's impact. And obviously Moy, from a creativity standpoint, were players that we had to shut down. But I think we always performed quite well against them, considering, I don't know if it was just a matchup thing or if we had the edge on them. But from memory, we always had really good results against them, even away from home. We did quite well against them. But I just remember them being like a really, like you knew you were in for a really strong game against them. I think any team you play that has Tony Popovich as the coach has always been quite a challenging outing. But one thing that that was noticeable with them is that they seem to have experienced players in almost every position. So they kind of had players who knew how to play the role, who knew how to play professional football, and who knew how to get 3 points. So when we came away with wins against them, it was very sweet.
Absolutely. Do you remember that debut, the home debut rather, quite fondly? Because Geronimo scored on the night. We won 1-0. It was a bit tense at times. No one really knew what to make of the Wanderers back then as well. It was just their second game as a club. But a real healthy crowd in that night. I remember it. Is it still something you remember quite fondly?
Honestly, no. This may sound bad. I don't actually remember a thing about that game. I remember them wearing their away kit, and I remember Shinji Ono, and that was it. I don't remember anything. I remember most games that I played, but for some reason I don't remember that. And maybe it's because how little I may have played. I don't remember. But yeah, I don't even remember Geronimo scoring in that, if I'm truly honest. So it might show my age, but it was, what was it, like almost eight years ago now. So
yeah, it was. Fair enough. We'll move along. I've got to ask you for your prediction. Who comes out on top tonight?
I think it'll be a 1-1 draw. It'll be an exciting game that could go either way, but I think Adelaide will get a goal. I just think Western got some quality, experienced players that if they do go down 1-0 or if they do go up 1-0, they're not going to be too overawed by the situation. Whereas Adelaide might play a little bit more in emotion given the youthful aspect. But hopefully Adelaide United and the home crowd I've experienced it is awesome. So that does impact any team coming to Coopers for sure. So I think 1-1.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Jake. We will move along to talking more about the person behind the player that is Jake Barker-Daish. So we're firstly going to take a look at your introduction to football. You're a Melbourne boy. So tell us, what was your introduction to football? And obviously it saw you eventually joining the Victorian Institute of Sport in 2009.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to play soccer. I call it soccer at the time, but football, I'll say soccer for this sake. Soccer, cricket and AFL were like my three sports. And I was probably more talented in cricket and AFL. I always felt like I had to work harder at soccer to be better or to be sort of seen as a good player, whereas the other ones came a bit more natural. But I think what got me into football so young was, one, I had an uncle, my mum's brother, who's they were born quite apart, so he's only 7 years older than me. He was playing for the Blackburn Rovers Academy at the time, and he was doing quite well. So I think when I was maybe 12 or 11, he would have been 18, 19, and he was training with the first team and playing in the reserves. So it was kind of and they were a top 10 team.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah. So for me, when I used to go over to England and see him in that environment, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like he's playing with proper players. Like at the time, Blackburn had like some phenomenal players like Tugai, Morton Gams-Pedersen. I think they might have still had like players like Andy Cole.
And Brett Emerton was there as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, Brett Emerton was there. Lucas Neal. I mean, they had a great team. They always seemed to like overachieve in plays. They'd get David Bentley was there, Brad Friedel, Lorenzo Amaruso. There was a lot of players. So I took obviously a lot of inspiration from him. He was a bit of like an idol for me as a kid. And then even though it wasn't my sort of number one sport from a, I guess, skill set point of view and one that I had to work harder at than the others, it was the first state team I ever made was in soccer. So the under 12 primary schools team, which funnily enough had Jackson Irvine, Jamie McLaren and Curtis Good in it. And we won everything, which was awesome. There might have been more, can't remember now, but yeah. So since once I had that first taste of going to the nationals and playing for my state team, when I came back, I felt like I was one of the worst players at the tournament. I just didn't do anything. I was just happy to be there in a way. And I think remembering at that tournament, the New South Wales team had like Terry Antonis, Mustafa Amini, Queensland had Josh Brillante. ACT actually had Tom Rodgick because ACT could field a player over age because they didn't have the massive players to choose from. So there was all these players there that were really exceptional. And I just took a lot of inspiration out of that of like, well, I need to get better to compete. And then around the age of 12, 13, I just trained every day at football, took it so seriously that I got to a point where I was probably more advanced in my age group. And I actually, the reason how I ended up at the VIS, because I was way too young to be in the VIS at the time. I think I was 13 and most of the boys there were 15 and 16. But I was doing quite well. So they offered me a part-time scholarship, which is a training scholarship. So you train with them full time, but you have to play for another club on the weekend. And I was 14 playing under 21s football. So which was like reserve grade football for the MPL or the EPL back then. And I was playing at Altona Magic, and it's a funny story. I dropped back down to the under 15s for the Manchester United Cup, which was a tournament they used to run in Australia.
I remember it.
And they were in the final four. So we had to play a semi-final and a final, and they asked me to come back and play. So I did, and ended up scoring like 3 or 4 across those 2 games. We played Green Gully in the final, which was Jamie McLaren's team. We beat them 3-2, and I scored a double. And the senior coach was there from Altona. And after that game, he's like, "You're coming with the seniors." So I actually made my debut in the VPL, which is the NPL, when I was 14 years old. Yeah, which is crazy because I think about the players, and they won the championship that season, although I wasn't there for it. But pretty much I was the youngest player at the time to play in the VPL in its history. So that was pretty cool. And then the next day I went to VIS training, and Ian Greener, who's the head coach, found out, and he's like, "Well, that can't happen." He's like, "One of the players is leaving the VIS." He's like, "We're going to put you on a full scholarship." So then from there, I never went back to Altona after that. But then, I was on a full scholarship with VIS. So, which was just an awesome place. I mean, at the time, there was like 20 players in the VIS, and 9 of them were in the Joeys set up. So we had a pretty elite environment of players like Bailey Wright, James Jeggo. There's probably heaps more that were really talented at the time, but those 2 are probably notable that have gone on and done well.
Certainly a prodigious talent from the outset. I want to, just positionally, I want to ask you, the kind of midfielder you were back then, is that the type of player that you molded into as a senior professional, or has your role changed since you first started playing football at a serious level?
Yeah, I think when I started getting really serious about football around the age 13, 14, I was like a centre midfielder, attacking midfielder. I played as a striker as a kid, but yeah, as I got older, particularly when I went to the AIS, I was playing as like an 8, 6 and 10, always rotating in those positions. I probably preferred, if I was fully fit, to play as an 8, because I felt like my creativity and sort of ball movement was a real strength of mine, and skill on the ball, like obviously being a player to link up with and play with. And when I was playing my best football was always when I was scoring goals. So I could obviously do an element of that as a number 6, but you're obviously a bit more defensive. And then as a sole number 10, I could do it when I was sort of in form and playing well and scoring goals, but I always just felt my best as a number 8.
Very versatile player indeed. There's not many that can play across all 3 positions in the middle of the park. I want to fast forward to the start of your professional career with Gold Coast United. Now, you literally came in at such a ridiculously turbulent time for that club. There was so much going on behind the scenes with Clive Palmer's antics and various other instabilities abound. It must have been a super strange way to sort of experience professional football for the first ever time, but you nevertheless made 7 appearances for them in the A-League, and as a young player, that's all that matters, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was probably the worst possible place a young player could go to. If I had my time again, I would never have gone there. Not even if they were still around, just having got an up-close view of, like, I guess, Miron Bleiberg and the way he coached football was, like, unbelievably poor in comparison to what I had just come out of at the AIS, which was obviously working with Jan Versleyen and the Dutch sort of philosophy around possession. And then you sort of went to Gold Coast, and it was just all over the shop. What was one of the reasons why I went there was I just felt like I was going to play. And I was only 17 when I signed there, and I played quite well against the Gold Coast youth team. And at the time, the Gold Coast youth team had the best youth setup in the country, and they were promoting youth quite heavily. And there was a big sort of focus on, like, well, we had this element of like Shane Snelts and Jason Kalina, who had been there for a while, and now we want this next wave of youth to come through that have been winning obviously I think they've won back-to-back national youth championships. So Clive Palmer was like big about that as well. But yeah, I mean, look, there was a lot of just noise from the outside the whole time, and it's like you couldn't really control it. So as a player, you just had to turn up and play every day. And one thing that was really positive out of my experience there was playing for Mike Mulvey, who was the youth coach. He was just a phenomenal football coach, football person, great with youth, great man manager, and just instilled a lot of belief in the young players. And all my appearances came when Miron left and Mike took over as the senior coach. And I think what was really sort of sad about that breaking up is everyone, although we were like between 17 and 20, everyone had a really feeling if we were able to stick around, we would have been a really competitive team, just because we had good imports and then the complement of like some of the best young players in the country. But yeah, it just wasn't to be. So for a lot of reasons, the club fell down, and yeah, just struggled to get crowd and memberships and growth. And it was just, I'm not too sure that'll be a market the FFA will ever tap back into after that.
It does seem unlikely. I don't want to evoke too many more frustrating memories from that period of time, but I've got to ask you, is it true that it got so bad that you guys were actually training in Clive Palmer's backyard at one point in time? Because that was reported back in the day.
No, that's false. But even so, like, I don't see why that would be a bad thing. Clive Palmer's backyard would be bigger than probably the MCG. So, I don't think that would be a problem. That would probably be an upgrade, if anything. But nah, we always trained out at, I think it's called Metricon Stadium now. We trained there. It was Carrara at the time, out the back of those grounds. And look, we had a relatively good setup. I think just one thing to note, what was disappointing was what was noted at the time, the biggest, the most participated sport from a junior standpoint was soccer. And we didn't have anyone at our ground, and we didn't do enough community work since when I was there. I don't remember going out to one club to sort of get them along and promote membership. But I just think the whole operation, it's reflected why they're not there anymore. So,
well, sadly, that, I guess, as a neutral fan, that was the end of Gold Coast and a start of a new beginning for you. Now, I've got to ask you, firstly, Jake, your connection with Adelaide. What brought you to Adelaide?
Yeah, it was interesting because to be honest, my first preference at the time was Melbourne Victory. Not just because they were a Melbourne team and I wanted to come home or anything like that. That didn't faze me. But they were the first club to show interest in me in signing me. I think the coach at the time was Jim Magilton.
Correct.
It was just before Ange Postecoglou. And the last 7 games that I played for Gold Coast were my first 7 games in the A-League. I actually had 3 assists. And we won 3 out of the 6 games, and we beat, I think it was Perth Glory, who, like, they went on to be in the grand final. I think we might have lost 1-0 to Brisbane, who they were the grand finals that year. But we were essentially the last team to beat Perth Glory before they lost in the final that year. So we obviously did okay. And I remember playing Melbourne Victory, and I came on after like 15 minutes because someone got injured. So I practically played most of the game. I had a really good game. And then from there, Melbourne Victory were really interested, and it seemed like that was going to be the club I was going to go to. But then Jim Magilton, I think it left or got sacked, and they didn't have a coach. So we waited around for a little bit to see what would happen there. And then Adelaide came in that gap. Michael Petrillo called me and just shared that, Adelaide were interested in signing me. And at that time, Adelaide from the outside had like a really strong squad and a big, maybe dumb emphasis at the time. I don't know. I was young, but a big emphasis for me was a club that was stable, because I was just like, I don't want to go through that roller coaster again. And Adelaide had obviously been around for a while, and they weren't going to go anywhere from an A-League standpoint. So it just seemed like a good opportunity. And I think it's always, as a player, it's nice to go where you wanted. And Cozzy was a fan of mine. So that kind of what spurred that move on. But if Melbourne Victory probably had a coach at the time, I don't know if I would have ended up there.
Well, I don't know if many of our fans will be happy to hear that.
No, I know. Well,
we'll keep that one quiet.
To be fair to me, Adelaide didn't show interest until after Victory. So if it's any compliment to Adelaide, I ended up choosing Adelaide over Victory. So
and no one's going to begrudge you for wanting to go home anyway, mate. So no dramas there at all. We'll get on to talking about the football side of things. So John Kuzmin is now the manager. We end up having a fairly respectable season, but falling short of the mark exiting early rather during the finals campaign in early 2013. You, meanwhile, got on the park 11 times for us that season. Talk to us about how you'd settled into the city, first of all, and then the football side of things as well, how that was coming along for you.
Yeah, Adelaide's a great city. I love Adelaide. I think one thing I found with Adelaide, the people, just so nice. Obviously, coming from Melbourne, it's a bit bigger than Adelaide, but I just felt everyone in Adelaide was down to earth, like, all the time. And obviously, from when you're new to a city, getting used to its sort of landscape, it's really easy to do in Adelaide because everything's quite close to each other. Sort of everything's 15, 20 minutes from wherever you are. So that made it quite easy. And then the change room I walked into, outside of football, was just a bunch of really good boys. So like, I remember like my first 2-3 weeks, I just felt like I knew most of them quite well, and it kind of stayed that way for the rest of the time I was there.
Who did you bond with most in those early days? We know you're quite fond of John McCain. Bruce Duttay is still very much in regular contact with him as well. You told me that you've still got a WhatsApp group active from 2012, which is remarkable.
Yeah, it's insane. My best mate in Adelaide at the time, like everyone knows this, like we're two peas in a pod, was Dario and I. We went everywhere together, did everything together. I don't know if it's because we were just the two single lads in the team, but I, as a football person, like I looked up to Dario a lot. He helped me a lot on the field, but then, we just got on like a house on fire off the field. So pretty much after every training session, I would do something with him. But just in general, like, as I said, the WhatsApp group that's been going on for 9 years probably now, which has got Nigel Bogard, Michael Zullo, Terry Cowich, Johnny McCain, Bruce Jitte, Cam Watson, and Jared Walsh. I don't know how Jared Walsh has snuck in there, but he's a fundamental part of it now. It just kind of shows what the dressing room was like at the time. Like even boys that are playing in the A-League now, I think Zuls might have said it, like he hasn't really experienced the change room similar to it, even to this date. So even though I didn't play that long as a pro player, it kind of does show that was a special environment to be in.
Certainly does. So moving into the next season, Josep Gombau comes in during the 2013-14 pre-season. There's suddenly a real positive mood around the club again. You really appeared to thrive under Gombau too, playing in some big games against Sydney FC and against the victory on the night of the club's 10-year anniversary match, which my background very much illustrates. You scored against Sydney FC as well on what was an absolute electric night in the ground. What were your favourite memories from your time as a Reds player on and off the park?
So I think probably just going back to my first year, I actually got on really well with Cozzy, and from a playing point of view, I thought I was actually going to play a lot because I had a really good pre-season. And I was in most of his starting 11 for all of the pre-season. And I played the first few rounds off the bench because obviously we went with the experience. And one thing that was most notable around that time was Sean Tagg, our strength and conditioning coach. Like he got us so fit. And we had some games in the Asian Champions League. So I think from the first 10 games under Cozzy, we were on top. Like we were flying from a fitness standpoint. I actually got osteitis pubis, just because I always think because I was quite young and I was playing in the young Socceroos at the time, but like we had these like 5-month pre-seasons back then, which was just immense. And the way we were training, I don't know if my body just couldn't handle it, but I broke down. And then I played the back end of the year when Michael Valkanis took over, when we had the run to the finals, which was obviously a really positive period for me. And I felt like I was going to be quite an integral part of the team going forward. And then, we had another change in coach, which was challenging for me in itself because we were just trying to get some stability under a coach. I'd already had 2 at Gold Coast, and then I was on my 3rd at Adelaide in like my 3rd pro season. So continuity wasn't something I unfortunately got. But when Josep came, like everything changed. The whole way we thought about football and approached it completely shifted. And for probably like 3-4 months, it was like quite hard in the sense of getting adjusted to it. And he was quite critical of where we were at. Like he would tell you, you knew exactly where you stood with Josep. Like there was games we played in the preseason, and like you could play well, you could score a couple of goals, but he would just rate you out of 10, like on his philosophy. And I remember like some boys, and I was one of them, he'd put you like, you'd score a double against like, I don't know, a Metro Stars or whatever. And he'd put down 4 out of 10 and just be like, because of this. And you just sit there and you just have to take it because he's the coach. And it was getting quite brutal at times. Like some boys really were like sort of quite defensive on it because it was almost like he was gunning for you. But all it was him just trying to implement his philosophy and get a lot of excellence out of what he did. And I think as any football purist, it was really fun to be a part of when it started to click. I think probably like one third of the way through the season, it finally started to take its shape. He copped a lot of criticism from media and even maybe the fans initially because we weren't winning and it was kind of taking its time. But once it clicked, I mean, everyone inside the 4 walls knew what was going to happen because we could do it in training and you essentially were controlling games and controlling opposition and they were having to play against you rather than the other way around. And I think my experience with Josep was challenging because although his football philosophy fitted the way I played because I was a ball player, it was just hard because the players in front of me were superior. Like, I mean, Ozzy Malik played quite a lot. Then you had Karuska, you had Dario. So I was only really going to get opportunity if they were injured. And even if I had played well or done well, it was likely that they were still going to start. So that was hard. And I just had some injury interrupted times under him. But I did have I think a period of 10 games on the run where I played quite a bit. And it's funny because I think my last game ever in professional football was against Sydney FC, which I scored, and I think I got like a man of the match on, and never played again after that. So that's always kind of an interesting point, because I always talk about that in my podcast as an example of like, you never know what you have until it's gone, and also you need to prepare. You never know like when change is going to come, because if anyone had said when I was walking off Cooper's that day after like a 1-1 draw playing Del Piero, and I was getting on a flight the next day to go away with the Olyroos, that I'd never play again, like I would have laughed. But that's what happens. So
tremendous highs and lows of being a professional athlete and how quickly they can come. I want to just spend some time focusing on the coaching side of Gombau, because everyone's really interested in how much he actually did to implement a completely new playing style. And obviously a lot's been made of his Barcelona background, being so heavily involved with La Masia, and then doing really well in Hong Kong too. So he really always came across as a hidden gem in sort of the global coaching ranks at the time of when Adelaide United brought him here. As a young player, do you remember seeing a huge amount being implemented in those training sessions? Was he a very technical coach? And because as you sort of said, when it all started to flourish, we easily became probably the most watchable team in the league. Results or not, that was evident across the board. And the human side of him as well. There's a lot that's been made of the fact that he would take players under his wing and really devote a lot of his time off the park to making sure that their wellness was good, and he was sort of a bit of a father figure as well. So just those two aspects there, the technical side of his coaching, and also how he came across as sort of a mentor off the park. What are your memories from all that?
Yeah, look, the way my relationship ended with Josep was actually pretty bad, to be honest. But in saying that, I'll give you an example of like, he was like, first and foremost, putting away my sort of experiences towards the end of my contract. He was a great coach and a great person, and like a great guy to be around. Like he was very fun, and obviously wanted to have like a mateship with his players and trust and bond. And it was a really good time under him. But I do want to actually explain that it's one of the first times I ever met him, which is really unique. But I went to Barcelona in the season before he came.
Mm-hmm.
The season he came. So in that preseason, I actually, after the season, we finished up with Michael Valkanis as coach. I went to Barcelona with my dad. We went on a holiday, and we actually it was the last game of the season in La Liga, and Barcelona were playing Malaga. And we're sitting in like the third tier of the Camp Nou, like watching the football. And one of the best games I've ever seen. Eric Abidal retired that day. Barcelona put 6 past him. There was like 4 goals from outside the box. It was a hot day. And I'm sitting there, and about 10 rows in front of me, I'm sitting in like a 100,000 seat stadium. And I see Michael Petrillo walk in front of me. And like, I didn't know he was there. And I see him on the phone, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, is that Petrillo? So I pick up the phone, and I'm like, I call him, and I just see him pick up, and he's like, Jake? And I'm like, Petrillo. And he's like, what's going on, mate? I'm like, are you at the Camp now? Are you in Barca? He goes, yeah. And I go, no way. And he goes, oh, came over and spoke to me and goes, oh, I'm actually here because we're about to get this coach for the club. And he's like, I actually love you to meet him. So anyway, and like, because I don't want to speak of Josep in a sour note of obviously how he ended. I want to explain like the kind of guy he was. So yeah, when I was in Barcelona, I was staying at the hotel along the beach, and Petrillo called me next day and goes, hey, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, oh, just with my family, whatever. He goes, well, Josep wants to come pick you up. He wants to take you to a game. So he came and picked me up with his agent and Petrillo, and we went to a game. We went to 2 games. The first one we went to might have been like a 3rd division game in Spain. And you won't believe this, but I went there. We went there to watch Sergio Thirio. And he goes, see the play on the right there? He goes, we're thinking of signing him. He goes, what do you think about him? I want your honest opinion. I'm like the standard of football wasn't as good as the A-League, but you could tell Dario was quality. So I'm like, I think he'll do well. I'm like, is he going to come? He's like, I'm going to try. Next thing you know, he's obviously an Adelaide legend. And then after that, he took me to Barca B, played Villarreal at the mini Camp Nou stadium next to the Camp Nou. And I went there and we watched players like Deulofeu, Marc Bartra, Sergio Roberto play against Villarreal. And it was just an incredible standard of football. So I knew at that time, I'm like, we're in for something special with this coach that's going to change the whole landscape of this club because of already the way he was looking at football, the football he was watching and the football he was accustomed to was not what we were in Australia. So to implement it, like in his training sessions, was like the first few weeks. And I remember like players like Dario, Vidosic, Garcia, like players that have played a lot of good football, high quality clubs. Josep was making us do the most basic stuff. Like we'd play possession games and he'd implement 6 rules. And if you didn't do his 6 rules, you'd be out. So there'd be people on the outside and you'd have to swap with someone, almost like a sin bin. And one of them was like, if you see a pass, pass the ball. If you don't see a pass, dribble and find a pass. If you can't dribble and find a pass, don't lose the ball. If you lose the ball, you're out. Like stuff like that. And people were like, well, like people, some boys like, I play for the Socceroos. Like, I don't know how to find a pass, this, that. But it was his way of like primary school teaching you his philosophy, which took so much time to get a hold of. And then towards the end of the pre-season, once he started to bring in players that would complement his philosophy, like Isaias, Dario, obviously we had players like Carrusco and stuff that was perfect for what he wanted to do. It started to take its shape, and then it actually, like, football became quite fun. But just for me being a young player at the time, it was really hard team to break into. And I guess he put a lot of challenge and emphasis towards me to get in there, which was quite hard because I wasn't always fit. I was carrying a lot of injuries, and it just kind of didn't end in the best way. So I just think, Adelaide was extremely fortunate to get him as a coach. Very fortunate.
Jake, that is a brilliant story, and thank you so much for sharing it with us. Amazing how everything can just come around like that in football. You're watching Syria, and then he's here the next minute. It's just in Spain on a holiday. It's incredible, and football generally does do the full circle, and I don't know how, but it's just got a roundabout way of finding all corners of the world and everyone in it. Such a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it with us. So, I mean, it gets towards the end of that season in 13-14. Was it purely a managerial breakdown, or what was the reason for why, unfortunately, you could not remain as a Reds player going forward?
Yeah, I look, it was tough. There's a few things that was going on, and this is probably like being a young player. I just probably either lacked mentorship or just didn't use my voice. But I was in the last year of my contract, and my first 2 years in the A-League were actually already injury interrupted. And at this time, I was probably Josep's first sub off the bench. I played 9 games off the bench in a row, but I was playing like 30, 35 minutes, 25 minutes and making impact. And it started like, even though no one wants that role, his philosophy was Jake will come on and make an impact. So my view was like, well, when there's an injury, I'm going to get a chance. So
yes,
I didn't want to share. Peter Kitty, the physio at the time, knew, but I didn't want to share. I had a stress fracture in my foot, which it was playable on, obviously. But I'd go to bed and wake up in the morning and I couldn't walk. Like it just like swell up overnight, and I'd feel like I'd have a rock in my foot, and I'd hobble to the car. I'd have to wear really thick Air Max shoes just to kind of be able to flex my foot. And then I'd get to training and ice my foot like before we went out, just to try and take painkillers and stuff and get through training. And like I was in that cycle for half a season. Like the game I scored against Sydney and all the games leading up to that, I was playing in so much pain.
And that would have brought on some serious anxiety, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it did. It did, because I didn't know what to do. And at the same time, if I was honest with myself, which I quite am, like a period, obviously that period when I was playing, I was confident I'd get a renewal of contract. But when I came back from the Olyroos tournament, I just wasn't in the team because the team was performing and I couldn't get back in. And the pain in my foot was getting worse and worse. And then I just struggled to get back in, and we started to clash a little bit, Josep and I, because essentially one of the things he put to me was that I wasn't fit enough for his style. And one of the things was the intensity of when we lost the ball, the reaction we had to make. It was like we had a 10-second, we'll win the ball back in the first 10 seconds. If we don't, then we drop, we give them the respect, and then we figure it out from there. And like my sort of speed endurance wasn't up to scratch. So my innocence at the time, I contacted Darren Burgess from Port Adelaide, who was a strength and conditioning coach. And I said, look, I need
Huge name.
I need to get, because I had a contact, Peter Bruckner, who was good friends with him. They used to work together at Liverpool. And Burjo was obviously the Socceroos strength and conditioning coach in the past. And I just contacted him and said, mate, this is my challenge at the moment with Adelaide. Like, I want to get back in. I need to get fitter. Because we're in season, we're not really doing a lot of high speed sort of endurance work. Can I train with you on the side? Like, I'll pay you whatever I have to do. And he said, mate, thanks for reaching out. I've got an understudy. This would be perfect for him. He'll catch up with you and be in contact. So I actually started training with his understudy one-on-one, which was really good. And I actually started to make some progression. So those games that I was getting on the run and when I scored against Sydney, like I was training with the guy at that time. So I was doing extra work to get myself in a position. And first and foremost, let me say, this is not foreign in football. Like people have their own trainers, their own physios. It's normal.
Absolutely.
The club in Adelaide didn't really know about it, but in my mind, I was like, it wasn't affecting them. It was only going to benefit them. And I wasn't obviously doing anything untoward, but you probably don't remember Val and Josep had like a real bust up that season.
Oh, I think everyone remembers, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah. I was just saying this, right? Like he mentioned his son was a shit goalkeeper and all this stuff, and it's
yes.
like, holy shit, this is going to blow up, which it did. And Val used to kind of always gun for Josep for a period, and I think it took its toll on Josep at that time, and he exploded. And then pretty much it got leaked that I was training with someone to Val. And this is my, I've got nothing against Val, but this is just why some of the stuff he used to write was just unnecessary because it affected people. And he didn't realize that and he didn't care because he wanted to sell an article. And that's why a lot of players, struggle to communicate with him because there's no value in it for them. And yeah, he wrote an article, I think at the time, and I'm not going to quote anything in the article because I don't remember, but essentially saying Adelaide, he's branded at Adelaide United not fit. And we were doing okay in the season too. And pretty much put my name to it that I was training with someone, doing all the stuff on the side because I wasn't fit, which I wasn't fit, but the team was. And the only reason why I was doing it was because I was trying to get back in the team. And the club might not like me saying this, but I couldn't really care. But they suspended me for, I think it was a week or two, as punishment because I put their name in jeopardy and I obviously made Josep look bad. And I'm 19 years old, just trying to get myself back in the team. So there was all these things happening. And then after that, I lost a lot of respect for him because he even said to me, he goes, no, what you're doing is normal. Carlos Puyol has his own trainer. Xavi has his own physio. I know this, I see it in Barcelona, but with the situation, they suspended me. And then a few weeks later, Josep said, look, we're thinking of re-signing you, but now we have the opportunity to sign James Jago for the same money. And we decided to do that. So we're not going to re-sign you. And then the second he told me that, I just I stopped playing because I said, well, I need to sort my foot out because I can't walk. If I'm not in your plans for next season, it's in my interest to take care of my body.
Yourself,
and, prepare for what may be next. So after that, we just completely broke down. And to be honest, it's a big part of it was probably what Val put out in the media. So that's why, it's journalists and people can, when you sort of brand something that you don't know the full truth about, it can really impact people's lives.
That's an extraordinary turn of events, and I'm so sorry to hear that you had to contend with all those things because it's extremely unfair for a young player that's just got the best interests of the club as well as their own career at heart. But that's the way it goes sometimes, and unfortunately it paved the way for your Adelaide United exit. You then, though, made a career move which we don't often see from a young Australian. So you then went to play at a non-league level in England, playing for Colne F.C. in England. What was it like?
Yeah, so let me say, I went to UK not to play non-league. So my reason for going there was I actually trialled. So I had this stress fracture in my foot, which ended up keeping me out for 3 months. And then I changed my agent at the time because he was sort of struggling to help me get another club. And in fairness to him, I definitely felt like I knew I should be on a A-League list.
Yes.
But my last half of the season, I didn't play because I was of my injury and obviously the fallout with Josep. So I didn't really have any runs on the board. So I knew I was going to have to go on trial. And I started training with an agent out of Canberra, Andy Burnell, to get myself fit. And I'd flown there to kind of stay there for 2 weeks just to train the house down. He had a boxing gym. We were doing a lot of cardio, running. I was training with boxers every day just to get fit again. And I remember 4 days into my training with him, he got a phone call from Western Sydney saying, hey, he knew someone at Western Sydney, and they got word back to Popper, and Popper's like, oh, will Jake come on trial? And I went there, I actually said at the time, I said, Andy, I don't know if I can go because I don't feel ready. And I know it's an opportunity, but is there any way that can give me a bit more, a few more weeks just to get myself in fitness? And Popper, being Popper, said, oh, if Jake wants to be here, he'll be here. And that was it. So I had no choice but to go. And I trained there for 5-6 days and did really well. And then we played a game in Canberra, funny enough. So I went back to Canberra, and I just hadn't played football for a long time. The last game I played was Sydney FC, or the Olyroos game, sorry, in January. And this would have been pre-season for the next A-League. So it was a while between drinks. And yeah, I just remember feeling so out of place. Like the soccer ball felt like a golf ball to me at the time. And I didn't really play that well. And then I remember afterwards just being really down about it because the team bus left. I obviously stayed in Canberra with my agent. The team bus left, and like Popper, I said this in an article the other day, and it's nothing towards him or anything, but at this time in my life, it was like a really tough period because Popper didn't even like acknowledge to tell me that I wasn't good enough. He didn't tell. I would have rather he told me I was shit, but he told me nothing. I just had to assume that I wasn't getting any progression in that trial, and that was it. So he left, and I didn't hear anything, and then I started to lose like connection to the sport a little bit because I was like, well, this is really just a business and I'm getting treated like shit here. And like I've worked my whole life at this. So my view at the time was like, I need to go overseas because in the A-League's not going to happen. There's like 10 teams, all the rosters are kind of taken up. As a young player, there's probably 20 spots. And I've gone to one of the clubs where there was opportunity and didn't get a look in. So I actually went to the UK because I've got an English passport to trial and try and make a Championship, League One, League Two side. And that was my plan. So when I went over there, I trialled with Reading for 2 weeks. I trialled with about 4 or 5 clubs whilst I was there. I think it was Reading, Oldham Athletic, Hibernian, Accrington Stanley. And there was one more which slips my mind. But I essentially got close to a couple. Some I was a little bit far off. I wasn't fit. But what was really challenging for me whilst I was there is I was living, my mum's family's there, but I was technically living by myself on my own wage. And I was training every day by myself just to try and keep fit. And that was taking a toll on me mentally because I'm self-motivated, but at the same time, to get football fit, like training by yourself, there's only so much you can do. Like you need to play games, you need to be in a team environment doing drills. So I made the decision to go and train with a non-league team just to train and be around a team environment and kick the ball. So I wasn't kicking the ball against the wall. And then they saw me in training. They're like, well, can you play for us like straight away? And I said, no, I don't want to play for you guys because, excuse me, I watched one of their games and it was like a violent league. And they're like, look, we've got some injuries. Is there any way you can play? We've got a cup game on the weekend. And I was at this point where like, you know what, I just want to play again, try and enjoy it. So I played 2 games for him. And then like I quickly established like if I want to trial and be fit and healthy, like I shouldn't play in this league because it was where the term pub league comes from. So a lot of people think I went there to play non-league, but I just went there. I trained with the club for 2 weeks to try and get some sort of training in my belt for trialing. And then, unfortunately, when I was at Hibernian, I had like a knee problem. I did like sort of like some sort of tear in my knee. So I ended up coming home after that. And then at that point, I've really sort of lost connection to football and it lost its kind of value to me, I guess.
Yeah, it's really, really disheartening to hear how things unfolded for you. Can I just start this next sort of phase of the interview by asking you, if I can pick out a club like Oldham, for instance, what was the level like, honestly, compared to the highs you experienced in the A-League?
The quality, so I always felt League One was the perfect correlation to the A-League. What I think the A-League at the time had superior to League One and like to a lot of leagues in the world that were probably similar was like the quality of imports we had. So I felt like League One, I felt Championship when I was training at Reading was better than the A-League for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the players they had there, the speed of the game, the professionalism, everything was just, it's one of the biggest league in the world, right? So, and I think Championship's the 4th most watched league in the world at the time when I was training there. I remember someone telling me. But yeah, the League One was a really good standard. With a bit more of a different style of football, a bit more direct.
Yes.
But I just felt like, if to be transparent, the A-League at the time, and I'm not as close to it now as I was, but the A-League at the time, the quality of imports we had and the ages we were getting them in at was really impressive. And I think that made that point of difference quite strong. So yeah, they were probably the most similar.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I want to just quickly touch on you representing your nation at a youth level. Must be a hugely proud moment that you look back on, being able to put on the green and gold. So just quickly summarize that aspect of your career for us. It's something everyone dreams of doing. You did it, whether it's at a senior level or not, it doesn't matter. So tell us what it was like to put on the green and gold.
Yeah, the best feeling in the world. Just it's such a unique thing. You feel like you're going to war in these games because you're representing your country and you're versing another country, and it's like, when there's a tackle or when there's anything on the line. I was never more focused for a game than when I was playing for my country. I was fortunate to obviously come out of the AIS, where I had a really elite period of my youth development there and did really well, which helped actually accelerate me into the young Socceroos, to the Under-20 World Cup in 2011, which was in Colombia. So I think when I made that team, I was eligible for the next Under-20 World Cup after. So I was a bottom major. And
that was a super team, by the way.
Yeah, it was. So that I didn't play in any of the qualifications. I just kind of scooped into the World Cup squad.
Yeah.
But that team, they lost the Asian Cup final. So they were about to be the first Australian team to win a tournament in Asia. But they lost to North Korea 1-0, but they had a phenomenal team. And this is what I tell a lot of kids now. I'm like, because people get down and out about not making teams and rep teams, but I'm like, the Under-20 World Cup, Jan Verslaen picked me over Tom Rogic and Massimo Luongo to go to the World Cup. And I'm like, Tom Rogic's on a multi-million-dollar contract at Celtic, and Massimo Luongo was Asian Player of the Year a few years back and won the Asian Cup. So, you don't need to take those things to heart. I was there, I was ahead of them, but look where they are now. And that's why I think it's a really powerful thing when I say to people who are embarking on a career in sport, like, not to get too high, not to get too low, just to keep persistent and keep going. But my overall youth experience at Australia, I think I played like 20 or 30 games, and it was just like, a lot of moments I hold dear to my heart. And a lot of the games I played in were with guys I lived with at the AIS. So it was quite special. Like, a lot of your mates and brothers that you grew up with from the age of 15, we were then sort of, 3-4 years on playing for our country together. It was pretty special.
Very poignant words, Jake. It's really refreshing to hear. I want to move forward, and I want to ask you about then returning back to Australia, playing at an NPL level back home in Melbourne. So firstly, it must have been, I guess, a nice tonic to return home, at least after what had been a really intense few years for you by the sounds. Firstly, you signed to... I think it was South Melbourne in 2016. Correct. Yes. So obviously a massive club, and you went on to then play for the Melbourne Knights as well. So two historically huge clubs there that you're representing now in Melbourne. Talk to us about what it was like, this NPL tenure that you then embarked on in your home city.
Yeah, the purpose of me coming back to South Melbourne was I just wanted to try and enjoy football again. I didn't really care where I played. I'm like, I've worked so hard at this game for so long and achieved quite a lot at a young age, but like, there was just no connection to the sport anymore. And when I look back at my pro career, obviously it was injury interrupted. I was living away from home. I wasn't getting success on the field like I was used to and accustomed to, and my brain was sort of used to. So my sort of identity and personality was quite down. And then when I went to South Melbourne, funnily enough, I actually didn't enjoy it at all either. We won everything that year. That team was a really good team in the VPL, and the year before they'd won everything. And when I came, we'd won everything again. I think we'd won the championship. We lost the grand final, but we won the championship. We won the Doherty Cup. I think we did the double that year. I just remember not enjoying it at all. So I was like, I feel like at that time after South Melbourne, I'd retired effectively. I said, I'm not going to play football again. And then I had 1 year back at Richmond, which was a lower league team, same league, but they were sort of here, there, and down the bottom. I think they just got promoted. And one of the reasons I went back there was just to try to connect to the sport. And two ex-Socceroos were there, and Michael Peterson and Fausto Diamicis, and they said, look, we've been where you are right now. We know what it's like to lose that. We know everything you're going through. Trust me, just come down. Don't worry about anything else. Come and enjoy it. And I did, and had one of the most fulfilling years of my career from a playing point of view and fitness point of view, and really enjoyed it. And unfortunately, we actually got relegated. We didn't have the strongest team, but I just enjoyed football so much, and I felt like I individually, from a performance point of view, got my old self back. And then you mentioned Melbourne Knights, and this was kind of, I mentioned I've been out of the game before we jumped on for a few years, but I had a serious hip injury there, which kind of kept me out for a couple of years. So I had some surgeries, and then just, kind of didn't want to play football anymore. Wanted to just experience another side of life. So that kind of, detailed the last few years of my life, I guess.
I want to just say this. Not that you need any validation, but a lot of players that have probably experienced what you have experienced in your career probably compare where they're at in life to their ex-peers, and like you touched on there with Massimo Luongo. But to us fans, we're almost in a completely separated world to you, because to us fans, even just being able to say that you played one professional game is the coolest thing ever. And you did that, and you did it at multiple clubs. You had so many experiences, and it's really interesting just to note that you're obviously, fragile enough, particularly when you're going through these hard times, that you can view yourself as being in this bubble of real misfortune and hardships. But really, when us fans who live very ordinary lives compared to footballers think about, just experiencing for one day the life of a professional footballer, it's the coolest thing in the world. It really is. And, you've gone and done it. And so I guess that's just something that you can reflect on going forward. And I'm sure it's maybe one of the reasons why you thought it necessary to start this amazing podcast that you host, the Unlaced Podcast. So I want to get into talking about that. Why don't you tell us firstly why you started it, what kind of conversations we're going to be prone to hearing with the guests that you've had on. I know it's a very big interview that you had with Rashid Mahazi, who's been the subject of a lot of unfair criticism from Australia over the last couple of years for whatever reason. But obviously you have some very notable athletes that come on there and have some very compelling conversations with you. So tell us all about the Unlaced Podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you mentioning those words too. And don't get me wrong, being in football is the greatest thing ever. I mean, you wake up in the morning, you get to go kick a soccer ball. Like, what even is that, And I can talk brutally. People may think I'm bitter and stuff, but I just talk brutally honest about my career now, because everything that happened to me there that I probably even felt like I was a victim of has been like the most powerful and beneficial thing that could have ever happened to me, because I was forced to change and shift my life and adapt with change. And then as I started to do that, I'm like, the amount of stuff football is given to me that has nothing to do with the ball is invaluable for the rest of my life. And a big part of why I started this podcast was I was always passionate about athlete transition, because Johnny McCain said it to me, and it's so true. He goes, every athlete has one thing in common, and that's retirement. And it was quoted on an article I did recently. And when we were speaking about it, I was like, yeah, well, like when I came out, I was fucked, because I didn't plan on coming out. It wasn't my choice, and I was young. So I was like, at least had some time on my side. And then I spoke to Johnny, and Johnny's like, yeah, man, I was 34. I'd essentially done all I wanted to do in the game, but it was just as hard for me coming out of it as it was for you, because there's an identity to it. There's a cycle, there's a structure. And obviously when you're a bit older, you've got family and kids to look after too. So I was like, fuck, there's something here to talk about. And my view of it was like, I wanted to humanize athletes, because sometimes where, athletes are seen as objects that you judge quite heavily and critically, and, in everyone's right to their own opinions on a Friday and Saturday night. And, that's just passion, and that's part of the game. But the athletes have a life too, and they give up so much, so much to not be, to be the best that they can be. And they just can't be a normal human being. They can't do the normal things that, potentially you can do or I can do now, right? So I was thinking for a long time, how can I start a business in this space? Because the A-League for a long time has had a huge amount of churn and burn of players. And I think there's an issue with players coming out of those strict structures into day-to-day life. And I've known of a lot of people that have suffered with mental health issues, people that have gone in and out of jail that people don't know of, people that have taken to drugs, not just in football, but in other sports. And I just felt there was a topic of discussion here that's not being highlighted. And everyone in the professional arena is trying to support players outside of transition, or when transition's happening, and obviously outside of the game, to be more stable and more healthy and secure. But at the same time, like you can't manage everyone day to day. You can't support everyone. You don't have visibility of everyone across every sport. So there's a lot of things that go missing. And I went into a dark hole for a period of like, how do I come out of this? What can I do? And I was thinking of starting a business in it for a while. And I was like, I don't want to be one of those guys from the PFA, and I love the PFA, but I don't want to be one of those guys from the PFA that come out and does a really cool presentation and, speaks the truth about what life is outside of football. And for an hour or two as a young player, you're there like, this is awesome, I should take this seriously. And then by the afternoon, I'm back playing PlayStation and I've forgotten about what the fuck they said. So I was like, well, how am I going to do this where it can stay a consistent message? And then that's where the idea of a podcast came about. And then as the podcast has evolved, it's really not just been about talking about athlete transition and retirement. It's much bigger than that. It's like, there's obviously a comedy element to it. There's we talk about the athletes, why they're so unique, what they're doing to be the best of their sport. And then we talk about the inevitables, like, how do you keep balance outside of sport and, balance in your life? Because ultimately the players that I've played with, the best players I've played with, are the ones that have had really good balance off the field. And not solely invested in football. They're dedicated and they're professional as much as anyone, but they have vested interests elsewhere that they can switch on and off to. And like, I think, not enough players are doing that. And I think Stefan Merck's a great example in Adelaide of starting a side business whilst he's playing. With a platform he's got, it's beautiful, because now he's got other things he can focus on that are only going to impact his career. Because he can obviously have different perspectives. When he doesn't have a good game, he can go home and focus on something else. When he has a great game, he doesn't get too caught up in it. He goes home and focuses on something else. So just promoting a lot of thinking in this space and conversation, which has received really, a lot of good commentary and support. So I feel very fortunate for that.
Well, clearly you've always had a hidden talent for public speaking. It's a real credit to you for starting this podcast. And there's a great article that features you on Sporting News Australia that everyone should check out, and we'll put it in the description link. Jake, I want to just finish by talking about Moreland Zebras. We spoke about how special it is that you've reunited with Dario, Vidosic and Cameron Watson there. Two guys that clocked up a lot of games for our club, it has to be mentioned. So how are you all getting on playing NPL 1 at the moment in Victoria? I dare say you're enjoying football again to some extent.
Yeah, definitely. It's so the same guys that I've mentioned, and I started to enjoy the game at Richmond again. They coach at Moreland now. But I kind of joke to them that I'm the Ari Gold of the NPL, because I'm essentially the agent that's bringing in these players. So, yeah, I actually brought Rashid Mahazi, had a year off in the A-League, and I brought him down there, and he won Player of the Year across the league that year. And I sort of said, yeah, no worries, guys. And then I brought Cam recently. Cam Watson, who obviously played at Adelaide for a long time, and then most notably Dario, quietly retired from the A-League.
Very quietly.
Honestly, one of the most amazing careers, and as a gifted athlete and footballer, is probably one of the best I've ever seen. And arguably could have achieved a hell of a lot more with the skill set he had, but his career, what he achieves is second to none. And yeah, we actually, funny enough, Cam, myself and Dario, we all caught up for a dinner, and Dars was just sharing us that he had potentially an option to go overseas, and maybe there was one opportunity in the A-League, or he was seriously contemplating moving into coaching, because he was obviously at an age, he's got a couple of young kids, and a really good opportunity came up for him, Melbourne City's academy, to be a full-time coach. So once I got wind of that, then I got on the phone straight away, made sure the club knew, and to make sure everyone kept it hush so no one else knew. And yeah, we got him across the line to come to the club. So now, yeah, it's awesome. It's like a reunion, and it's funny because we played together almost 10 years ago. We're playing together now. So it's good fun, man. Can't complain.
Some special bonds there, and it's so good to see so many years after your time here in Adelaide. Jake Barker-Daish, we appreciate the honesty and rawness that you've shown in what's been an extraordinary interview full of these, crazy revelations that just aren't out there in the public eye. And it's been an absolute experience just listening to you. You're beautifully spoken. Got a great head on your shoulders, and we wish you all the very best in all your future endeavours with Moreland and with your podcast and in your day-to-day life. All the best with everything, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I really appreciate the opportunity, and great work to you on creating a platform, and for all the Adelaide fans out there. Thank you for all your support you've given me. I know some of you guys are tuning into my podcast and obviously tuning into this, so thank you guys so much. And yeah, look, Adelaide was one of my most proudest moments of my career, so you guys are still close to my heart. So hopefully we can get the win tonight.
There you go, guys. Beautiful stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and Jake Barker-Daish, all the best, and you stay safe in Melbourne.
Cheers.